My wife changed her passwords every week. She thought she was being careful. She didn't know I'd installed a camera in the living room. I watched her practice lies in the mirror before coming to bed. Sunday nights at 11:15, Nora Marlene would sit at our kitchen table with her laptop and phone, fingers dancing across keyboards with practiced urgency. Banking credentials, email accounts, cloud storage, social media profiles. Everything changed on schedule, like clockwork. I'm Silas Orrin, 39 years old, and I fix computers for a living. Network security, data recovery, the occasional surveillance system installation. People trust me with their digital lives because I look harmless: average height, thinning hair, wire-rimmed glasses that slide down my nose when I concentrate. Nora used to say I was invisible in crowds, and she meant it as an insult. Turns out, invisible has its advantages. The camera in our bookshelf was motion-activated, cloud-archived, with night vision capability. I'd installed it 3 weeks after finding burner phone receipts in her purse, standard surveillance equipment, the kind I set up for paranoid business owners who suspect employee theft. The irony wasn't lost on me. I expected to catch phone calls. Instead, I discovered something far more interesting. Traffic was terrible tonight, Nora would whisper to her reflection in the hallway mirror, adjusting her expression until concern looked genuine. The client dinner ran longer than expected. I missed you so much. She'd practice each line until the delivery felt natural, then climb into bed beside me, her performance ready for morning. That first night, I watched the footage. I thought maybe she was rehearsing for work presentations. Nora ran public relations for a mid-sized consulting firm downtown. Practiced speeches were part of her job, but the content was wrong. These weren't corporate talking points. These were alibis. The notebook confirmed my suspicions. I found it in her gym bag, wedged between protein bars and spare workout clothes. Indexed by scenario, cross-referenced with calendar entries, 3 years of our marriage scripted in her careful handwriting. If he asks about Thursday, show mild irritation first, then fatigue. Don't oversell the exhaustion. He notices when I try too hard. She'd cataloged my reactions, studied my patterns, turned our relationship into a performance where she held all the scripts, and I played the unwitting audience. The camera captured everything. Nora on FaceTime with a man I didn't recognize, an unfamiliar apartment visible in the background. "The Portland place is ready," the voice said. "Just need the final transfer." She blew a kiss before disconnecting, then immediately opened her laptop to practice her story for the next morning. Emergency work trip. Back by Wednesday. Miss me while I'm gone. I sat in our bedroom, watching my wife rehearse lies about a city I'd never visited, an apartment I'd never seen, and a man whose name I didn't know. The rage should have consumed me. Instead, I felt something colder. Calculation. Nora thought she was careful. She rotated passwords, cleared browser histories, used private browsing modes, but she'd married an IT specialist who understood that digital security was only as strong as human behavior. She'd given me 3 years to study her patterns, and I'd been taking notes too. The next morning, she delivered her Portland story with Academy Award precision. Concerned expression, apologetic tone, just the right amount of reluctance about leaving me alone for 3 days. I played my part perfectly. Disappointed but understanding, supportive husband sending his hard-working wife off on another business trip. "I'll miss you," I said, kissing her goodbye at the door. She smiled and squeezed my hand, probably thinking how easy this was, how completely she had me fooled. She had no idea that I'd already accessed her cloud storage using credentials I'd captured months earlier. The Portland apartment lease was in both our names, though I'd never signed anything. The consulting income she'd been reporting to the IRS included payments for work I'd supposedly performed, creating tax liability in my name, while the actual money flowed to accounts I couldn't access. But the most interesting discovery was Dr. Vera Halden, our couple's therapist. She appeared throughout Nora's text archives, not as a neutral counselor, but as an active coordinator. Session notes shared with Nora in advance, My vulnerabilities discussed and weaponized, my anxiety medication adjusted upward on Vera's recommendation, keeping me compliant and confused. I'd been paying someone to help my wife gaslight me more effectively. That night, alone in our condo, I reviewed 3 weeks of camera footage. Nora practicing different versions of the same lies, adjusting her performance based on my reactions, consulting her notebook like a director reviewing blocking notes. The woman I'd married was gone, replaced by an actress who'd been studying my character for years. The most chilling footage was from 2 months earlier. Nora's tearful miscarriage announcement, our second pregnancy loss, had devastated me. I'd held her while she cried, taken time off work to support her through the grief, arranged for flowers to be delivered to her office because she said being surrounded by beauty helped her heal. Medical records showed no hospital admission. Pharmacy logs contained no prescriptions. The grief was performance. The pregnancy was invention. She'd practiced that scene for weeks, perfecting the right amount of tears, the proper tremor in her voice. I'd mourned children who never existed while she collected sympathy and attention for trauma she'd manufactured. My phone buzzed. Text message from Nora. Landed safely. Hotel is nice. Love you. Timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. The Portland apartment camera, yes, I'd found that too, showed her and her mystery man sharing wine on a balcony I was apparently paying for. I opened my laptop and began documenting everything. Screenshots, video files, financial records, text transcripts. If Nora wanted to play games with evidence and documentation, she'd picked the wrong opponent. I'd spent 15 years learning how to recover deleted files, trace digital footprints, and archive data that people thought they'd hidden forever. She thought changing passwords would protect her secrets. She'd just locked herself in with them. Tuesday morning brought coffee and revelation. While Nora sent me loving messages from Portland, I used her own documentation to map the conspiracy she'd built around our marriage. The notebook was a masterpiece of manipulation. Color-coded tabs separated different categories of deception. Green for work alibis, blue for family obligations, red for medical emergencies. Each section contained detailed scripts, backup stories, and contingency plans for when I asked too many questions. Silas notices inconsistencies in timeline details, she'd written in the margin of one entry. Keep secondary stories simple. Don't volunteer extra information unless he specifically asks. She'd been studying me like a lab specimen, documenting my behavior patterns to better exploit them. The woman who claimed to love me had turned our entire relationship into a psychological experiment. Dr. Vera Halden's involvement was even more disturbing. Text messages between her and Nora revealed a relationship that violated every ethical standard in couples therapy. He's showing increased anxiety symptoms, Vera had written. I'll recommend adjusting his medication upward. That should make him more compliant during sessions. They'd been drugging me into submission while using therapy sessions to gather intelligence about my emotional vulnerabilities. Every fear I'd shared in confidence, every insecurity I'd admitted under professional privilege had been weaponized against me. The financial architecture was elegant and devastating. Shell companies created in my name generated consulting income I'd never earned. Tax returns filed jointly showed me as a freelance IT contractor, complete with business expenses and home office deductions for the Portland apartment I'd never seen. The IRS liability accumulated in my name, while the actual money disappeared into accounts I couldn't access. If anyone investigated, the paper trail would show me as a willing participant in tax fraud. Nora had positioned herself as the innocent spouse, unaware of her husband's illegal side business. The perfect setup for divorce proceedings, where she'd claim ignorance while I faced federal charges. But the most sophisticated element was the recruitment of my estranged brother, Cedric Fallon. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, not since his gambling debts had destroyed our mother's funeral arrangements. Nora's text history showed months of careful cultivation, positioning herself as the bridge to family reconciliation. "Silas misses you," she'd written to Cedric. "He's just too proud to reach out first. Maybe we could arrange something casual, just the three of us for dinner." Instead of reconciliation, she'd been gathering ammunition: medical histories, childhood traumas, family financial vulnerabilities, Cedric's current gambling debts, $37,000 to people who didn't accept payment plans, became leverage. Nora offered to clear his obligations in exchange for testimony about my unstable behavior if divorce proceedings required character witnesses. She'd turned my own brother into a weapon against me. The Portland apartment surveillance revealed the identity of her partner, Julian Voss, 41, architect, divorced, with a portfolio of high-end commercial properties and a reputation for aggressive business practices. His social media showed expensive tastes and exotic vacations, the kind of lifestyle that required significant funding. Camera footage from their apartment showed planning sessions that had nothing to do with romance, financial documents spread across the dining table, legal paperwork reviewed and signed, phone calls with lawyers and accountants. This wasn't an affair. This was a business partnership with my assets as the primary commodity. "The timeline needs to be accelerated," Julian said during one recorded conversation. "His anxiety medication is working, but he's still too functional. We need him completely destabilized before filing." Nora nodded, making notes in a different notebook, one I hadn't found yet. "Vera thinks we can trigger a complete breakdown within 6 weeks. Once he's hospitalized for psychiatric evaluation, the financial power of attorney becomes active." They were planning to drive me insane, literally. The increased anxiety medication, the gaslighting therapy sessions, the manufactured crises, all designed to push me past my breaking point so they could claim legal control of my mental health and financial decisions. I sat in our kitchen, surrounded by evidence of a conspiracy so comprehensive it took my breath away. 3 years of marriage, and I'd been nothing more than a long-term mark in an elaborate confidence game. Every loving gesture, every shared moment, every intimate conversation had been performance art designed to position me for maximum exploitation. The rage finally came, white-hot and clarifying, but underneath it was something more useful: professional appreciation for the complexity of their operation. Nora and her team had built an impressive system of manipulation and control. Unfortunately for them, they'd targeted someone who understood systems better than they did. Every system has vulnerabilities. Every network has backdoors. Every conspiracy depends on communication, and communication leaves traces. I'd been playing defense for 3 years, reacting to Nora's moves without understanding the game. Now I knew the rules, the players, and the objective. Time to change strategies. My phone buzzed. Another loving message from Portland. "Missing you terribly. Can't wait to come home tomorrow." I typed back, "Miss you too. Can't wait to see you." But I wasn't waiting for anything. I was preparing. The camera footage had given me their playbook. The financial records showed their methodology. The text archives revealed their timeline. They wanted to destroy me systematically, professionally, completely. I was going to return the favor, but with one crucial difference: they'd never see it coming. Wednesday evening, Nora returned from Portland with gifts and apologies, playing the role of devoted wife with practiced perfection. She'd brought me a coffee mug from Powell's Books and stories about client meetings that never happened, her performance flawless except for one detail. I'd watched her buy the mug online from our kitchen table 2 weeks earlier. "The client was impossible," she said, settling into my arms on the couch. 3 days of revisions for a campaign they'll probably cancel anyway, but the money's good, and it helps with our savings goals." Our savings goals. The Portland apartment she was furnishing with my money while planning my psychological destruction. I held her close and made sympathetic sounds while calculating exactly how much evidence I needed before implementing my response strategy. That night, she performed her usual mirror rehearsal for Thursday's lies. I watched from the bedroom doorway as she practiced surprised delight about an unexpected dinner invitation from her college roommate. "I know it's short notice, but Jennifer's only in town for one night. You don't mind, do you?" Jennifer lived in Seattle and hadn't spoken to Nora in 5 years, according to social media records I'd verified. Thursday's dinner was actually a planning session with Julian and Dr. Vera, scheduled to finalize the timeline for my psychological breakdown. I'd read the agenda in Nora's encrypted files. The next morning, I kissed her goodbye and wished her a wonderful evening with her imaginary friend. Then I drove to work and began implementing phase 1 of my counter-operation. My office at Meridian Tech Solutions occupied the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse downtown. 23 employees, mostly programmers and network specialists, handling IT support for small businesses across the metro area. I'd worked there for 8 years, building a reputation for solving impossible problems and maintaining absolute discretion about client data. That discretion was about to become very useful. "I need a favor," I told Marcus Webb, my closest colleague and the only person at Meridian who knew about my marriage problems. Marcus was 26, brilliant with code, and possessed the moral flexibility that made him excellent at recovering data that clients claimed was accidentally lost. "What kind of favor?" he asked, not looking up from the network security audit he was conducting for a local law firm. "The kind that requires your special talents and absolute silence." That got his attention. Marcus specialized in digital forensics, the gray area work that involved recovering files from damaged drives, reconstructing deleted communications, and occasionally accessing systems that clients had locked themselves out of. He asked few questions and delivered impossible results, which made him invaluable to both our employer and certain clients who needed problems solved quietly. "I'm listening," he said. I explained the situation in clinical terms: systematic fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit involuntary psychiatric commitment. I showed him selected evidence: financial records, forged documents, the tax returns filed in my name without my knowledge. I didn't mention the surveillance cameras or the full extent of my intelligence gathering. Some secrets were better kept private. "This is sophisticated," Marcus said, reviewing the shell company documentation. "Professional-level identity theft with long-term planning. How long has this been going on?" "At least 3 years, possibly longer." He whistled softly. "What do you need from me?" "Complete digital documentation of their network communications, financial transaction histories, device location data, and I need it all legally defensible for court proceedings." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's a big ask, the kind that could get complicated if anyone asks how we obtained certain information. Which is why I'm asking you specifically. You've never met my wife. You have no personal connection to this situation. If you happen to discover evidence of financial fraud during routine security work for a client, and that evidence revealed additional criminal activity, you'd have a professional obligation to document and report it." Hypothetically speaking. Hypothetically. He was quiet for several minutes, studying the financial records. Marcus had grown up poor, worked his way through community college, and built his career from nothing. He had strong opinions about people who used their advantages to exploit others. "When do you need this?" 2 weeks. They're planning to accelerate their timeline. I need to be ready before they make their move." "Consider it done." That evening, Nora returned from her fictional dinner with Jennifer, full of stories about catching up with an old friend and reminiscing about college adventures. She'd actually spent 4 hours at Julian's penthouse apartment, reviewing psychiatric evaluation procedures and discussing optimal timing for triggering my breakdown. I knew because I'd been tracking her phone's GPS location since discovering the conspiracy. The device she thought was secure had been compromised for months, feeding me real-time data about her movements, communications, and contacts. "Jennifer looks amazing," Nora said, settling into bed beside me. "Divorce agrees with her. She's dating again, traveling, really living her best life. The irony was perfect. Nora was describing her own fantasy future, the life she planned to build on the ruins of our marriage. Freedom, financial security, and a new relationship with Julian, funded by assets she'd stolen from the husband she was systematically destroying. "That sounds wonderful," I said. "I'm glad you had such a good time." She smiled and kissed my forehead, probably thinking how easy this was, how completely she controlled the narrative. Her performance was flawless, but she was playing for an audience that had already seen the script. Over the next week, I maintained my role as the unsuspecting husband while building a comprehensive intelligence file on everyone involved in the conspiracy. Dr. Vera Halden's patient records, obtained through Marcus's creative interpretation of data recovery protocols. Julian Voss's financial history, including previous divorce proceedings where similar asset-hiding strategies had been employed. Cedric's gambling debts and the specific threats he was facing from creditors. The picture that emerged was even more disturbing than I'd initially realized. This wasn't Nora's first attempt at elaborate spousal manipulation. Julian had helped 2 previous partners execute similar schemes using psychiatric manipulation and financial fraud to destroy their husbands while positioning themselves as innocent victims. Dr. Vera Halden had been involved in both previous cases, providing professional credibility to claims of spousal mental illness while helping to orchestrate the psychological abuse that made those claims seem legitimate. They were professionals. I was just their latest mark. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd chosen a target who understood their methods better than they did. Every digital communication they thought was private, every financial transaction they believed was hidden, every coordination meeting they assumed was secure. All of it was documented, archived, and legally obtained through legitimate security auditing procedures. I had enough evidence to destroy them all. The question was how to deploy it for maximum impact. Nora wanted to drive me insane. I was going to return the favor, but with surgical precision. Sunday night, 11:15 p.m. Nora sat at the kitchen table for her weekly password ritual, but this time I was waiting in the living room when she finished. The camera footage played on our television screen, showing her practicing lies in the hallway mirror. She walked in during rehearsal, her voice trailing off when she noticed herself on the screen. The look that crossed her face, surprise giving way to careful assessment, was more genuine than anything I'd seen from her in months. "Silas." Her voice was carefully controlled, but I caught the tremor underneath. "What is this?" "This is you, 3 nights ago, preparing to tell me about your emergency dental appointment." I gestured at the screen where her recorded image adjusted facial expressions to simulate tooth pain. "Excellent performance, by the way. Very convincing." She moved toward the television, probably thinking about turning it off. But I had the remote and 3 weeks of additional footage queued up. "You installed cameras? In our home?" "Our home that you've been using as a rehearsal studio for elaborate deceptions. Yes, I installed cameras. Turns out, when you suspect your spouse of infidelity, surveillance is a reasonable precaution. This is illegal. You can't record people without consent." I laughed, the sound harsh in our suddenly quiet living room. "Legal advice from someone who's been filing fraudulent tax returns in my name? That's rich, Nora. Should I ask Dr. Vera what she thinks about consent? Or maybe Julian has opinions about privacy rights?" Her face went completely blank, the mask slipping to reveal something cold and calculating underneath. "I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I've discovered everything." I switched to a different video file, this one showing her FaceTime conversation with Julian about the Portland apartment. The shell companies, the forged consulting contracts, the psychiatric manipulation, Cedric's recruitment, the timeline for driving me insane. All of it, Nora. Every detail of your 3-year plan to destroy me. She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face with the same analytical expression she used when practicing lies. How long have you known? Long enough to document everything: financial records, communication logs, medical fraud, conspiracy to commit tax evasion, conspiracy to commit involuntary psychiatric commitment. I have enough evidence to put all three of you in federal prison. All three? You, Julian, and Dr. Vera. Did you really think I wouldn't find the other cases? The previous husbands you destroyed using identical methods? This isn't your first time, Nora. It's just your last. She sat down slowly, her composure cracking as she realized the scope of what I'd uncovered. What do you want? I want to understand why. 3 years of marriage and I never saw this coming. Was any of it real? Did you ever actually love me? Or was I just a mark from the beginning? Her laugh was bitter and surprisingly honest. Love? Silas, you were convenient. Stable income, good credit, trusting personality, no close family to ask inconvenient questions. You checked every box for a long-term financial extraction operation. The words should have hurt more than they did. Instead, I felt something like relief. The woman I'd mourned losing had never existed. I wasn't losing a wife, I was exposing a criminal. The miscarriages? Theater. Effective theater, judging by your reaction. You were so sympathetic, so supportive. It was almost too easy. The therapy sessions? Intelligence gathering. Vera's very good at her job. She had you mapped psychologically within 3 sessions. Every vulnerability, every trigger, every pressure point we could use to break you down when the time came. I nodded, filing away her admissions for the legal proceedings that would follow. And Julian? A partner. Someone with experience in asset extraction and divorce strategy. He's helped several women escape financially abusive marriages. By creating financially abusive marriages. She shrugged. Perspective is everything. I stood up, walking to the window that overlooked our building's courtyard. 3 years of my life, built on lies so comprehensive they constituted their own reality. You're done, Nora. All of you. I have enough evidence to destroy your lives the same way you planned to destroy mine. You can't prove intent. The financial arrangements were legitimate business investments. The therapy was genuine couples counseling. Everything we did has plausible alternative explanations. Maybe, but I don't need to prove criminal intent to ruin you socially and professionally. I just need to present the evidence publicly and let people draw their own conclusions. That got her attention. Criminal charges required proof beyond reasonable doubt, but social destruction only required reasonable suspicion. The court of public opinion had much lower evidentiary standards. What do you want? She asked again, but her tone was different now, less defiant, more calculating. I want you gone, out of my home, out of my life, out of my financial accounts, tonight. And in exchange? I don't immediately release the footage of you practicing fake miscarriage announcements to every contact in your phone. Her face went white. Social media had made public shaming a devastating weapon, and she knew her reputation couldn't survive that kind of exposure. The PR industry was built on image management, and her image would be permanently destroyed. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone and showed her the draft message, already prepared with video attachments and a contact list that included her employer, her clients, her family, and every professional connection she'd built over the past decade. Try me. She stared at the screen, probably calculating odds and alternative strategies. This is extortion. This is consequences. You spent 3 years systematically destroying my life. I'm offering you the chance to walk away before I return the favor. And Julian? Vera? They get their own conversations, but you're my wife, so you get the first opportunity to minimize the damage. She was quiet for several minutes, thinking through her options. Finally, she nodded. I need time to arrange things. Apartment, moving truck, financial transfers. You have 48 hours. After that, the evidence goes public regardless of your cooperation. And you'll delete the recordings? I smiled, the expression feeling foreign after months of manufactured sympathy and concern. I'll delete nothing, but I won't actively distribute them if you disappear quietly and permanently. She stood up, her composure returning as she shifted into damage control mode. This isn't over, Silas. You think you've won, but you don't understand the game you're playing. I understand it perfectly. I just play it better than you do. She walked toward our bedroom, probably to pack essentials and contact Julian about emergency relocation plans. I watched her go, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months, complete clarity about my situation and my options. The woman I'd married was gone, replaced by a criminal who'd been systematically destroying my life for 3 years. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated her target. I was about to show her exactly how expensive that mistake would be. Nora was gone by Tuesday morning, taking only clothes and personal items, leaving behind 3 years of carefully constructed deception. But her departure was just the opening move in a larger game that required more sophisticated strategies. Julian Voss and Dr. Vera Halden were still active threats, and they had resources Nora lacked. Julian's architectural firm provided legitimate income and professional credibility. Vera's medical license gave her legal authority to make psychiatric evaluations that could affect my freedom. They needed to be neutralized completely. I started with Dr. Vera Halden. Wednesday afternoon, I arrived at her office for what she thought was an emergency session triggered by Nora's sudden departure. I'd called that morning, claiming severe anxiety and suicidal ideation, exactly the kind of psychiatric crisis she'd been trying to manufacture for months. "Silas, I'm so glad you called," she said, settling into her chair with practiced concern. "Nora mentioned you've been struggling with increased anxiety lately. Her decision to take some space must have been very difficult for you." Interesting. Nora had already contacted her, probably to coordinate their story about my deteriorating mental health. They were still following the original plan, even with their primary asset removed from play. "I don't understand what happened," I said, affecting the confused, medicated tone they expected. "Everything was fine, and then suddenly she's talking about needing space and time to think. Did I do something wrong? Is this my fault?" "Mental health challenges can put tremendous strain on relationships," Vera said, making notes in the file she thought was confidential. "The important thing is focusing on your recovery and stability." "But what if she doesn't come back? What if I've lost her forever?" "That's a natural fear, but right now we need to focus on managing your anxiety levels. Have you been taking your medication as prescribed?" She was still trying to drug me into compliance, even with Nora gone. The medication she'd prescribed, increased dosages of anxiety suppressants that would make me appear unstable and dependent, was part of their long-term strategy to establish my mental incompetence. "Yes, but it's not helping. I feel worse than ever. Sometimes I think everyone would be better off if I just disappeared." Her eyes lit up with professional interest. Suicidal ideation was exactly what she needed to justify involuntary psychiatric commitment, the nuclear option in their plan to gain control of my assets and decision-making capacity. "Silas, that's a very serious statement. Have you had specific thoughts about harming yourself?" "Sometimes. When the anxiety gets really bad, I think about how peaceful it would be to just stop." She was writing furiously now, documenting my supposed mental breakdown for the legal proceedings she thought were coming. "I think we need to discuss inpatient treatment options, just temporarily, until we can stabilize your medication and develop better coping strategies." Perfect. She was recommending exactly the psychiatric imprisonment they'd been planning all along, even without Nora's coordination. The conspiracy was still active, which meant I had legal justification for what came next. "Dr. Halden, before we discuss treatment options, I have something to show you." I pulled out my phone and played the audio recording of her conversation with Nora about adjusting my medication to increase compliance. Her voice was clearly audible. "He's showing increased anxiety symptoms. I'll recommend adjusting his medication upward. That should make him more compliant during sessions." Her face went completely white as she recognized her own voice discussing strategies to manipulate my mental state for non-therapeutic purposes. "Where did you get this?" "From Nora's phone, along with 3 years of text messages between you two, coordinating my psychological manipulation, sharing confidential session notes, and planning to use false psychiatric evaluations to gain legal control of my finances." I showed her the text transcripts on my phone, scrolling through months of unethical collaboration between my wife and my therapist. "You've been violating every professional standard in couples therapy: patient confidentiality, therapeutic neutrality, informed consent, professional boundaries, all of it." This is taken out of context. My communications with Nora were part of standard couples therapy coordination. Standard therapy doesn't involve prescribing medication to make patients more compliant. Standard therapy doesn't involve sharing confidential session notes with one spouse to help them manipulate the other. And standard therapy definitely doesn't involve planning to commit someone for psychiatric evaluation based on manufactured symptoms. She was quiet, probably calculating her legal exposure. Medical license revocation was the least of her problems. Conspiracy charges, fraud, violation of patient rights. The list of potential criminal charges was extensive. "What do you want?" "I want your complete patient file on me and Nora, including all notes, recordings, and communications. I want a written statement acknowledging your unethical conduct and terminating any professional relationship with both of us, and I want your cooperation in documenting Julian Voss's role in this conspiracy." "I can't violate patient confidentiality by discussing other clients." I laughed. "You've been violating patient confidentiality for 3 years. Julian isn't your client. He's your co-conspirator. The text messages prove you've been coordinating with him directly about my case." She was trapped, and she knew it. Professional ethics violations would cost her license and career. Criminal charges would cost her freedom. Cooperation was her only option for minimizing the damage. "If I provide what you're asking for, what happens to the recordings?" "They become part of a legal file that stays private unless you force me to use them in court. But if you continue practicing therapy, if you contact Nora or Julian, if you make any attempt to interfere with my life, everything goes public immediately." She nodded slowly. "I'll need time to prepare the documentation." "You have 24 hours. Thursday evening, Dr. Vera Halden delivered a complete file documenting 3 years of unethical therapy practices, including her coordination with Julian Voss and detailed notes about their psychological manipulation strategies. She also provided a written confession acknowledging her professional misconduct and agreeing to never contact me or anyone in my family again. 1 down, 1 to go. Julian Voss was a more complex target. He had money, legal resources, and experience with this kind of conflict. He'd also been planning my destruction for 3 years and wasn't going to surrender quietly. But he'd made the same mistake Nora had. He'd underestimated his opponent. Friday morning, I drove to Julian's architectural firm in the Pearl District, carrying a briefcase full of evidence and a very specific proposal for ending our relationship permanently. It was time for the final conversation. Julian Voss's office occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse in the Pearl District, all exposed brick and industrial fixtures designed to project creative authenticity. His receptionist, a young woman with art school aesthetics and bored efficiency, announced my arrival with barely concealed irritation. "Mr. Voss will see you now," she said, gesturing toward glass doors that opened onto a space designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive furniture, architectural awards displayed like trophies. Julian stood behind a massive desk, wearing the kind of casual, expensive clothes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Silas Orrin," he said, not offering to shake hands. I wondered when we'd finally meet. "Julian Voss, The man who's been planning my destruction for 3 years. He smiled, the expression confident and predatory. I don't know what Nora told you, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. I have documentation of everything. The Portland apartment lease in my name, the shell companies generating fraudulent income, the coordination with Dr. Halden to manipulate my psychiatric treatment. All of it. His smile faded slightly, but he maintained his composure. Those are serious accusations. Do you have proof? I opened my briefcase and spread financial documents across his desk. Bank statements, tax returns, property records, communication logs. 3 years of evidence laid out in chronological order. Complete financial documentation of your conspiracy with my wife. Every fraudulent transaction, every forged document, every illegal transfer, plus audio and video recordings of planning sessions, text message archives, and Dr. Halden's written confession acknowledging her role in the scheme. Julian studied the documents, his expression shifting from confidence to calculation. This is impressive detective work, but you're missing the bigger picture. Which is? You were never the primary target. You were just the funding source. That was unexpected. Explain. Julian walked to his window, looking out over the city with the satisfaction of someone who owned a piece of it. Nora came to me 2 years ago with a problem. She'd married someone stable and boring, but she wanted out without losing her lifestyle. Standard divorce would give her half of your assets, but half of middle-class savings wasn't enough for the life she wanted. So you helped her steal everything instead of just half. I helped her understand that marriage is a business partnership, and business partnerships can be restructured to benefit the more valuable partner. The casual cruelty of that statement was breathtaking. By driving me insane and stealing my identity, by creating leverage for more favorable divorce terms, the psychiatric evaluation would have established your mental incompetence, making Nora your legal guardian with power of attorney. Very clean, very legal, very profitable. For you and her. For everyone involved. You would have been well cared for in an appropriate facility, Nora would have been free to pursue her actual interests, and I would have earned a substantial consultation fee for facilitating the arrangement. I stared at him, trying to process the complete absence of moral consideration in his worldview. You've done this before. Twice. Both cases resolved very satisfactorily for all parties. Except the husbands you destroyed. He shrugged. They were obstacles to their wives' happiness and financial security. Sometimes obstacles need to be removed. And you see nothing wrong with that. I see inefficient resource allocation being corrected through creative problem solving. Nora is intelligent, ambitious, and attractive. You're a middle-aged IT worker with anxiety issues and no significant assets. The market correction was inevitable. The complete dehumanization was almost impressive in its thoroughness. I wasn't a person to Julian. I was a balance sheet problem that needed to be solved through strategic manipulation. Unfortunately for you, the problem solved itself differently than you expected. Did it? Nora's gone, but the financial structures we created are still in place. The tax liability is still in your name. The psychiatric evaluation Dr. Halden recommended is still medically justified. You've won a battle, but you're still losing the war. He was right about the ongoing vulnerabilities. Even with Nora gone and Dr. Halden neutralized, the financial fraud they'd created would continue generating legal problems for years. The IRS investigation, the shell company obligations, the Portland apartment lease, all of it remained my responsibility until I could prove fraud in court. Which brings us to why I'm here, I said. I want to propose a settlement. I'm listening. Complete financial remediation. Every fraudulent account closed, every forged document corrected, every illegal obligation transferred back to your name. In exchange, the evidence I've gathered stays private. Julian laughed, the sound genuinely amused. You're offering to blackmail me into cleaning up my own successful operation? That's not how this works. Actually, it's exactly how this works. Because the evidence I have doesn't just document financial fraud. It documents a pattern of criminal conspiracy spanning multiple cases. When the FBI reviews your previous divorce consulting work, they're going to find very interesting patterns. That got his attention. Pattern evidence could turn individual cases into federal racketeering charges, transforming misdemeanor fraud into felony conspiracy with decades of prison time. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone and showed him a draft email addressed to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, complete with evidence attachments documenting his involvement in 3 separate cases of spousal fraud. Try me. He studied the email, probably calculating odds and legal exposure. What exactly are you proposing? Complete restoration of my financial position. Every account, every obligation, every legal liability transferred away from my name, plus compensation for 3 years of psychological abuse and financial manipulation. How much compensation? $200,000. Cash, untraceable. That's extortion. That's the cost of making this problem disappear quietly. The alternative is federal prosecution and national media attention to your architectural firm's creative side business. Julian was quiet for several minutes, thinking through his options. Finally, he nodded. I'll need time to arrange the financial transfers. You have 1 week. After that, everything goes public, regardless of your cooperation. And you'll delete the evidence? I smiled, remembering Nora asking the same question. I'll delete nothing, but I won't actively distribute it if you fulfill the terms of our agreement. He extended his hand, and I shook it, sealing our arrangement with the same casual formality he'd probably used when planning my destruction. This isn't over, he said. You think you've won, but you don't understand the game you're playing. I understand it perfectly. I just play it better than you do. 1 week later, Julian Voss transferred $200,000 to my personal account and provided legal documentation correcting every fraudulent financial arrangement he and Nora had created. The Portland apartment lease was voided, the shell companies were dissolved, and the tax obligations were transferred to their proper owners. Nora disappeared completely, probably to another city where she could find a new mark for her next long-term extraction operation. Dr. Vera Halden closed her practice and moved to another state, her medical license suspended pending ethics review. Julian continued his architectural work, but without the lucrative side business of destroying inconvenient husbands. I kept every piece of evidence, archived and secured insurance against future problems from any of them. 3 months later, I moved to a new apartment across town, changed my phone number, and started rebuilding a life that was actually mine. The anxiety medication was gone, replaced by genuine peace of mind. The surveillance cameras were gone, replaced by actual privacy. The performance was over, replaced by reality. My wife had changed her passwords every week, thinking she was being careful. She thought she was running an elaborate long-term con, systematically destroying my life while building her own. She was wrong about everything except one detail. She should have been more careful. I was the IT specialist she'd been living with for 3 years, and she'd given me all the time I needed to learn her system. Turns out, when you understand the system better than the people running it, you can make it do whatever you want, including destroy the people who built it.